Hi YouTube, and welcome to Unproductive, a productivity series for the rest of us. For this final episode of the series in 2018, I wanted to talk a little bit about doing a life reset. I know this is a really common topic right now. I was just looking through my YouTube subscriptions, and pretty much everybody has something on like how to make your business great in 2019, how to lose weight, how to set New Year's resolutions, how to reset your life, etc., etc., etc. And I think that this is like great intentions and totally makes sense. And the very end of December for a lot of us can be a great time to do a little bit of a life reset. However, so many of those videos and podcasts and articles are geared towards a kind of specific angle, which is the exact reason that I do this Unproductive series, because not all of us want to lose weight, want to start a business, want to earn a lot of money. You might, and that's fine if it's true for you, but I think that when you're doing a little bit of a reset, whether it's for your entire life or you just want to look at some of the systems you've used throughout the year and see if they need tweaks, it can be a good idea to start from a more neutral place and consider what it is that you personally want out of your reset. So I'm going to give you 5 tips that help me when I'm doing a reset, and they're kind of a condensed down version of what I do when I'm working with somebody to help them with their productivity challenges. So number 1, I want you to kind of go outward and think about how you want to feel before you start thinking about specifics of the systems and processes that you might use. So what I mean when I talk about thinking about how you want to feel, what is it that would really light you up in 2019? Do you want to feel more accomplished? Do you want to feel maybe calmer, maybe more connected to others? Maybe you want to feel just less stressed out. Whatever it is, I think you might have a very different approach depending on what you want to feel. So, and the example of somebody who, has very concrete business goals, maybe they want to feel accomplished. And for them, accomplishment looks like X, Y, and Z in their business, in which case a traditional productivity solution would probably work great. But maybe what you want is to feel calmer. Maybe you want to feel more cared for and nourished. Then you might have a very different approach to a life reset than somebody who wants to feel accomplished. Or different people who want to feel accomplished would define accomplishment differently and would get there in different ways. So it's not just about the feeling itself, but it goes a little past that, and we'll get to that in number 2. If you're not sure how you want to feel, one resource I would recommend, there's a book called The Desire Map by Danielle Laporte, and there's a planner that goes along with it that I've done a little bit on the channel about. I think that book is a pretty good tool for coming up with what she calls your core desired feelings. So if you do want a resource, that can work well. But whatever you come up with, I recommend you go ahead and write down that feeling or maybe a few feelings so that you can come back to it later. Number 2. So once you have come up with feelings, I want you to try to identify your pain points from 2018 or a longer or shorter term if you prefer. So presumably if you need a reset, there's something that's not working or doesn't feel good the way you're currently doing things. It helps to sit down and really think about the pain points. And what I always like to do, I think this is the heart of my style, is to really ask people follow-up questions, several rounds of follow-up questions after they say what their pain point is. And there are 2 main kinds of questions. One would be, why is that a problem for you? And the other one would be, where does this thing come from? So to give an example, maybe one of my pain points is that I am overwhelmed. I've been really feeling like Like there's too much on my to-do list. Like a pain point for me is just I have a feeling that I can never get everything done. And so if I look at that pain point and ask myself, okay, so why is that a problem for me? Well, it's a problem because it makes me feel guilty. It's a problem because I feel like I don't deserve the nice things I have because I'm not contributing enough. I feel like I'm letting other people down. So those things are getting to kind of what the feelings are or the values are behind the initial pain point that I have. So in this case, like I don't want to let people down. That's getting to my desire to feel connected with other people, which is a little different from like having an arbitrary standard that isn't connected to people. So I might need to work more with that feeling of like, is this true that I'm letting other people down? Is it not true? How can I verify that? Are there other ways that I can work towards, knowing that I'm supporting people in my life and feeling connected to them? Or I might also ask, like, what is at the core of this thing? Like where does the feeling of overwhelm really come from? And if I dig a little deeper into that, I might realize, well, part of it could be like I have sort of arbitrary feeling of what doing well is or what being accomplished is. But it also might have come from concrete, practical things about my system. So maybe if I just have a standard to-do list, maybe this feeling is coming from the fact that I am always adding to my to-do list, and no matter how much work I get done, the size of my to-do list is always pretty large. So you'll start to see as you do this impossible fixes. So like maybe one fix would be that I'm not seeing what I've accomplished, and so I need a system where I can see what I've checked off next to what I'm doing, or like some sort of percentage rate maybe would help me feel more accomplished. Or maybe what it is that I need a system that filters more. I need to pick maybe 5 things for the week to feel accomplished. So there's like a misalignment between the feelings and my actual values. If I were to look at my list and see, like, oh, I accomplished 50 things out of 70, that wouldn't seem so bad. But then when I see 20 items sitting there glaring at me, then that brings about the bad feeling. So sometimes you can then be like, oh, if that's misaligned, then, what do I really think accomplishment looks like? Like if I want to feel accomplished, what's a reasonable level? Maybe that's showing 10 items at a time, or only showing the items I can do right now. Or maybe if what I want to feel really is calm, and this is kind of arbitrary, like this feeling of being overwhelmed is just because it's right in front of me, then maybe one of the solutions would be to not have my list open most of the time, to only open when I really need to pick an item and then to close it again. Or, it might make me feel calm to brain dump everything in a list, but I don't have to use the list as actively as somebody who really cares more about feeling accomplished and feeling like they've done things and checked things off. When you're doing this, I would take a note of anything that is kind of an external cue. So if you realize that what's at the heart of it is that you're feeling a certain way because of the media you're consuming, or what your friends and family are telling you, or ideas that you're getting from somewhere else, but you don't align with them. So again, like think about your values. It might be that what you hear from external sources is in line with your values, but maybe, for example, you are hearing lots of things towards, as January's coming up, about weight loss resolutions, and that's really not a value for you. Like you don't believe that health equates to weight, but if you keep hearing weight loss ads, maybe something in you is going to be like, well, I could lose weight, it's not that hard, there's nothing wrong with losing weight, maybe I should try it. But that's not really aligned with what you want, and it's really just a distraction. So this is kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, I think, but preparing in advance how you're going to respond to an external cue. So maybe it's just, you might try to avoid the external cues, but if you can't entirely, maybe it's like every time somebody's talking about weight loss, you just think to yourself, reminder, weight loss isn't of value to me. My health is not determined by my weight. A lot of research backs up that there's no correlation between health and weight. Or maybe it's, I think it can be really hard with the whole capitalist rat race, when people are talking about money. Like, money might not be a major value for you, but you are constantly hearing people talk about money, and you're like, well, I could make a little money, I could, and somebody brings up some sort of a side hustle that you're like, oh, I could do this, I could be pretty good at it, but the feeling you've been trying to reach this year is feeling calm and less stressed. And so one way you could respond is anytime a financial opportunity comes up, that you remind yourself, the core value, the core feeling I want to feel this year is more calm. This isn't going to achieve that. Or maybe somebody is talking about all the books that they've read, and I know I have this where I just like I want to read all of the books, and I will remind myself that I'm not going to live long enough to read all the books. All the books is not a reasonable goal, and it just stresses me out if I think about all the books I haven't read. So instead I think about the books that I have read that I value, that, and kind of thank them for what they've done for me, and also acknowledge that there is no arbitrary number of books I need to read to be well read or whatever. So number 4, I just got logged out of my computer. That's never good. All right, number 4. No, not even number 4, number 3. I don't even know where I am. So number 3 is to set intentions rather than goals. I don't think that goals are necessarily a bad thing in every circumstance or every situation. Like, I think SMART goals are actually a great tool for some people for projects. I use goals a lot at work to set targets for myself and my team. Now, we don't expect everyone to meet every goal that they set, and we do set ambitious goals, and sometimes we don't meet all of them. That's not really the point. But they can be useful if you need a very specific target or benchmark. However, I found that in my personal life especially, sometimes it makes more sense to set an intention rather than a goal. So I intend to do something, but I'm not going to be like, did I check yes or no? When I get to the end of the year. So an example of this is I've done for quite a few years the 101 Things in 1001 Days challenge, which is super fun. It's super easy. It's exactly what it says. You don't need any more instructions than that. You calculate with some online calculator what a date 1001 days from now would be, and you write yourself 101 goals. And I really like that activity, but if you think of them as goals, sometimes you can get kind of depressed about your success rate, because these are things you're expecting to do in about 3 years, 1001 days. And often, like, your desires and your focus changes in that period of time. So I usually get about a 50% completion rate on those. And I used to feel annoyed about it, but then I realized that, for example, let's say I set an intention to go to New Orleans. So I've had go to New Orleans on there for 3 lists in a row, so that's about 9 years. I hadn't been to New Orleans. It was sort of a bucket list thing. And I kept being like, oh, I didn't make it in these 3 years. I didn't make it. But when I really think about the intention, right, the intention was to go to a new place, to have fun, to experience something different. And I had plenty of trips in those periods of times, and I had plenty of like fun experiences in that period of time. So if I looked at it more as an intention and asked myself, did I meet my intention? The answer is, yeah, I kind of did, even though I didn't go to New Orleans. I did things that made me feel a similar way. And so this is why I think it's useful to like first think of the feelings you want to feel, and then if you're setting intentions, these are things that could make you feel that way, but they're not the only thing in the menu. They're just sort of something to shoot for. It's like that cliche about shooting for the moon and you'll land among the stars. But like, it kind of makes sense, you shoot for something in the neighborhood, and then hopefully you'll end up in the same neighborhood. And I think the nice thing about intentions too is they don't have as much of a time limit. Like when you think about a SMART goal, the T is for time bound. An intention doesn't have to be time bound. So I could say that I want to go to New Orleans, and I could say that 3 times in a row until finally 9 years later, I did in fact go to New Orleans. I went to New Orleans last year, and it was lovely. And it was just as good as had it been 9 years ago, maybe even better, because now I don't drink, and it was a lot less messy than it could have been. So I think like that often intentions can also be good because they don't expire, and you can intend to do something this year, but if you do it in 3 years, that's fine. If it takes you, 7 months to establish a habit that you were hoping to manage in a month, like go you established a habit. Habits are hard. So I do think that setting an intention can be more effective than setting a goal sometimes. Number 4, connect any new practices you come up with to your core desired feelings or your values. So as you do this, you'll probably start to come up with some ideas of how you might tweak your system. And I think it can be really useful, no matter what area of life the new thing is in, to see if you can connect it to a feeling you want to feel or to a value you have, especially if it's something pretty hard. Like if it is establishing a new habit, if it's something like a chore that you really don't like but you want to do, remembering why you did it. Like I worked with a coach and we talked about the way that it can be helpful to tie the thing that you see yourself as and want to be, like say a contributor to your community. If you tie something that is kind of or you can't always like immediately see the purpose of, to being a contributor to your community, then you can even put that as a tag like on your to-do list next to the item and be like, right, that's why I'm doing it. That's what's going on. And remind yourself. And you're not going to get it every time, but I do find that sometimes if I don't have a strong tie established in my mind between the change that I'm making and why I'm making it, then it's a lot harder. Like I've had to make some dietary changes recently that have taken years, many years to establish. For my health, because I have specific health symptoms that are really painful and shitty, and yet I still couldn't make the change because I would forget how much it hurt, and then I would see the thing and be like, that is delicious, I will eat it, and then I would be in pain again. And it was extra hard, I think, in some ways to establish a new habit because I don't believe in weight loss or dieting or any of those things. So a lot of those resources and tools would not work for me because they're not consistent with my values. But I had to, like the point at which I was able to make the dietary changes, it was all about how I wanted to feel. I had to remind myself whenever I started to eat the thing, be like, remember the terrible pain you were in. And I know negative motivation isn't always the best, but in this case, it kind of worked. Or sometimes the flip side, I would think, like, wouldn't it be nice to have a really good night of sleep rather than waking up in the middle of the night in terrible pain? And once I finally made that connection fully, and again, it took years and years and years, but once I did, like, that was the thing that got me there, not just kind of saying to myself, like, you shouldn't eat this, you shouldn't eat this. All right, number 5 is to plan some sort of review in advance. I think all of the best systems, whether they're from a book or from a course or self-designed, whether they're small or big, anything you reset, make a calendar note to yourself or whatever works for you, whatever kind of notification or reminder might work for you, to check back in on it in a reasonable period of time. Not necessarily a full year. I would check back in 3 months, 1 month, whatever you think would work well for you. But just do a little check-in. If you have a mid-year check-in at work, it's a similar sort of idea. Like, I always feel like at my 6 months check-in, it's like all the things I've sort of been letting go and not thinking about, like it's a good time to bring them back up. And more frequently than that is even better. So giving yourself a time to do a review, and then once you've done the review, you can adjust as needed. And I think that when you do this review, to pull it back around full circle, that you should look at how are you doing on the things you wanted to feel, how are the changes you made connecting, to it, and if the changes aren't working or you let go of them, like was there a disconnect there maybe, or are there other things that you could do to feel the way you want to feel? So that's why you want to write those feelings down, because it might not always be clear at first, like how to get to the way you want to feel, or what that feeling is like for you, or what it takes to get to that feeling. So it's trial and error. If something doesn't work, write down in your review why it didn't work. This didn't really make me feel calm because of all the extra steps it took to do it. It ended up just defeating the purpose. And that way you know not to go back to that thing and to look for something that is different along the line of how it didn't work. So those are my 5 tips for doing a yearly reset. I would love to hear what you think and how your yearly reset goes in the comments down below, or if there's anything you would like me to cover on the Unproductive series or this channel in general in 2019, I would love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a very happy new year.